and continues to work as an ER doctor. The treatment she had at the South Pole saved her life.
I had a new family, my friends there at the pole, and that's why I survived.
Next here on ITV1, it's the news at 10:30. Later here on ITV1, Sylvester Stallone and Donald Sutherland star in our movie The Prison Drama Lock Up at 11:35. Before that on ITV2, the Hannibal Lecter season continues in The Silence of the Lambs. That's just starting on ITV2. On ITV2, Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster star in the Oscar-winning thriller The Silence of the Lambs now. Here on ITV1, our late film, Lock Up, is at 11:35.
Iraq burns, but the fiddling goes on. Iraq's politicians haggle over a constitution, while their country slips ever nearer to civil war. They promise a deal tomorrow, but their deadline's passed. We ask if it's not already too late to rescue the dreams of democracy. Also tonight, a record £15 million fine for the gas company responsible for this explosion, which killed 4. Thousands mourn the death of the murdered Liverpool teenager, Anthony Walker.
I always felt honoured that he chose me as a friend, because Anthony was so popular with everybody.
Inside his mind, the prison diary of Harold Shipman. And in sport, it's captain against captain as Ponting slows the England advance.
And the top story in the Midlands tonight, the new owners of MG Rover Nanjing want to turn an office block into homes for hundreds of Chinese workers.
Good evening. Behind closed doors and high security walls, Iraq's political leaders today bickered over the final details of their new constitution. It is supposed to be the blueprint for a new and democratic Iraq, but outside those walls, the fighting continued. This is not fighting between insurgents and Americans, nor even clashes between rival religious or ethnic groups. This was all Shiite Muslims now fighting each other. As they fought, the deadline for deciding the country's political future came and went. The dreams of building in Iraq a beacon of Middle Eastern democracy appear to be fading just as fast. Our international editor, Bill Neely, has this report.
This doesn't look like a new Iraq. Today was meant to mark another turning point, the day Iraq's people agreed a blueprint for their country. Instead, Iraq's being torn apart. The Shiites of the south turning guns on each other. 8 of the president's bodyguards murdered. He escaped assassination. Amid it all, deadlock on the constitution, with even the government admitting the fighting trumps the talking.
2 or 3 different areas of security concerns, they all overshadow the achievement that is taking place on the constitutional front.
For once, the guns are not pointed at coalition troops. Iraqis are threatening each other and civil war on the very day a constitution was meant to herald peace. The constitution is meant to bind Iraq's 3 main groups, Kurds in the north, Sunnis in the middle, and Shias in the south, into one unified democratic state. But tonight there are at least 3 stumbling blocks. Firstly, the whole idea of unity. Now, Iraq will be a federal state, but the Kurds and the Shias want that to mean autonomy, virtually independence in their oil-rich north and south. The Sunnis in the oil-free middle region say no. Then there's Islam. The new state, unlike the old, will be Islamic. Shia groups want all Iraq's laws to be based on Islam. Kurds and Sunnis say no. They prefer the old secular Iraq. And then the constitution, well, it hardly protects the country's women. If Islamic or Sharia law prevails, they'll be forced from public life and forced to wear the veil. They are naturally worried.
This is the attempt to establish a democracy in a country that has never had one in the past and was always a rather peculiar federation between three competing elements that could only be held together by force.
And force day and night has gripped Iraq. All the glue that held Iraq's people together is coming apart. Today, the bodies of nearly 40 men were recovered, executed with single shots. And this was inside one political headquarters today. Gun-toting clerics, panic, shooting. It doesn't look like democracy or a modern state with a new constitution. Bill Neely, ITV News.
Well, very nearly 2,000 American soldiers have been killed in Iraq, but the mother of just one of them has become the focus of anti-war protests. Today, Cindy Sheehan, who's been camped outside President George Bush's Texas ranch for weeks, said she's taking her protest on the road all the way to Washington. But extraordinarily, her most vocal critics are the mothers of other dead soldiers. From America, Robert Moore reports.
Morning.
Just as the questions grow about the political stability in Iraq, and the president has resumed his holiday at his ranch in Texas, his precious mountain bike close behind. But Crawford is no political backwater these days.
You people have jobs!
Protesters and counter-protesters are defying the brutal heat of midsummer on the plains of Texas. Cindy Sheehan is the grieving mother who has single-handedly ignited America's anti-war movement. Her son was killed a year ago, and she's been demanding a face-to-face meeting with President Bush.
Our military presence there is unnecessary. We're not a liberating force, we're an occupying force.
Bring Cindy home! Bring Cindy!
But Bush supporters are also now rallying and heading for the ranch, exposing deep fault lines in America over the Iraq War.
A mom named Tammy Pruitt.
And in what's become a battle of the mothers, President Bush yesterday chose to highlight a woman who has 5 sons serving in Iraq and who supports the mission. But Cindy Sheehan's campaign is going further. She'll soon begin an anti-war bus tour across America. And in a month's time, that tour will end up here at the White House. Sheehan determined to keep the pressure on President Bush by setting up a permanent vigil. It may evoke memories of scenes here from a generation ago. For during the Vietnam War, demonstrators flocked to the White House to express outrage at President Nixon's policies. Now, 40 years on, another American president may have to look out on similar protests.
And Robert joins me now live from Washington. Robert, it's not going well in Iraq. It doesn't seem to be going too well at home either. Any sign that President Bush is worried?
Oh, James, behind the facade of a relaxed and vacationing president, no question he is worried. You could really sense it in speeches he gave this week in Utah and Idaho. His body language, the whole speech was defensive. I think there's a recognition from the president that the whole constitutional plan for Iraq not only involves high stakes, but is absolutely in the balance. If there's a continuation of this intra-Shiite violence, if Sunni politicians continue to reject the new constitution, then there is a prospect, I think, of the entire US plan for Iraq going badly wrong. And the president and his advisors then sense that it could continue to haunt the remaining years of the Bush second term. Now combine that with anti-war protests here at home now, and you could see he surely must be deeply worried.
Robert, thank you. Today, the gas company responsible for a blast which killed a family of 4 was given the biggest ever fine for a health and safety breach. Transco was ordered to pay £15 million for the explosion in Lanarkshire 6 years ago. The company was convicted after a 6-month trial in Edinburgh. Romilly Weeks reports.
This is where a house had stood, and this is where a family had lived. When mains gas leaked through a corroded pipe into the Findleys' home, they had no warning and no chance. The explosion that took all 4 of their lives 3 days before Christmas 6 years ago today cost the gas company Transco a record amount in fines.
Everyone's absolutely delighted at the result. It's a tremendous result, unanimous, no deletions on all counts, with an unprecedented fine of £15 million.
In court, Transco was criticised for failing to maintain the pipes and for showing little remorse. Even today, sorry was the hardest word.
We pleaded not guilty to all the charges, and we are disappointed with the verdict. Clearly, like yourself, you've just had a verdict, so now need some time to go and consider what options, if any, we're going to take next.
The fine dwarfs previous record set for health and safety breaches. Thames trains were fined £2 million for the Ladbroke Grove train crash. The Southall rail disaster cost Great Western trains £1.5 million. The size of the Transco fine could set a precedent.
If we see another privatised utility being taken to court with a poor repair and maintenance history, then I think you're going to see these sort of figures again, because I don't think the public will put up with it.
However, compared to Transco's profits of £390 million to March this year, the sum doesn't seem so huge, especially when this was so avoidable. Romilly Weeks, ITV News.
This was Liverpool's Anglican Cathedral today, packed not for a dignitary nor for a statesman, but simply for a popular sports-mad schoolboy. A schoolboy bludgeoned to death in a quite horrendous axe attack. These 3,000 people had come to the funeral of Anthony Walker, the teenager murdered just weeks before being awarded straight A's in his A-levels. The congregation was a sea of colour, football and basketball shirts, because Anthony's family asked for it to be a joyful thanksgiving for a young athlete's life. His mother wore an Arsenal shirt. Her son was a fan. Tim Rogers was at the service.
Driving rain didn't deter them. They came in their thousands from every corner of the city to mourn a young man whose death had, in the words of the Bishop of Liverpool, brought great shame upon their community. Anthony Walker was 18, a devout Christian with ambitions to become a lawyer, who was murdered in what police called a racially motivated attack. His family wanted his funeral to be a celebration of his life, and among those who paid tribute was one of his oldest friends who had good cause to remember Anthony Walker.
Anthony talked to me when nobody else would. I always felt honoured that he chose me as a friend, because Anthony was so popular with everybody. No one had a bad word for him, yet he chose to be friends with me, the geek of the year.
Speaking for Anthony's family, his godfather said that they hoped that if any good could come from his death, it would be that lessons will be learned.
Words of sympathy today must lead to a vision for Merseyside in which the Walker's family and other black families can live and work in any part of Merseyside without harassment, abuse, or attacks.
Members of Anthony's church said they preferred not to call this a funeral. As a born-again Christian, he was going home. Tim Rogers, ITV News, Liverpool.
The parents of a seriously ill baby have lost the latest round in their battle to overturn a High Court order which ruled their daughter Charlotte should be allowed to die if she stops breathing. Darren and Debbie Wyatt failed to convince the Court of Appeal to overturn the ruling, despite presenting a letter from Charlotte's doctors saying she was making remarkable progress. A rather disturbing insight into the mind of a serial killer emerged today. An official report into the prison suicide of Harold Shipman published extracts from his jail diary. They reveal how he carried out a calculated plan to kill himself in his cell. At one point, his diary reads, "I'm looking at dying. Can I hide it?" Here's Paul Davis.
Why he killed his patients, why he ultimately killed himself. Harold Shipman took most of his secrets to the grave. But this report gives a new insight into the mind of one of Britain's most notorious murderers during his time behind bars. Extracts from Shipman's diary released for the first time show suicide was never far from his thoughts. "I'm looking at dying. The only question is when, and can I hide it from everyone?" He wrote that in March 2001, 1 year into his life sentence. 10 months later, he wrote, 56 today, cards from everyone. Very, very sad day, not what life's about at all. financial problems experienced by his wife Primrose appeared to further depress Shipman. No money, not able to get DHSS to see the poverty she's in, he wrote in October 2002. Another extract dated January the 7th, 2004 says pointedly, "If this year doesn't get anywhere, I'm not sure it's worth the effort." 6 days later, Shipman hung himself in his cell at Wakefield Prison, using strips of bedding he'd smuggled in. While concluding that staff at Wakefield should have received more details of Shipman's potential for suicide when he was transferred there, the Ombudsman said the killer's death could not have been prevented.
In over 200 cases, Harold Shipman ended lives which he considered not to be worth living anymore. That's what it led to his periods in prison. And I suspect he reached a rather similar judgment about his own life.
A review of prison practice in monitoring at-risk inmates has now been ordered. Paul Davis, ITV News.
Roads ruined, railways washed away. A massive clear-up operation went on across Central Europe today after days of devastating, deadly flooding. More than 40 people are now known to have died. From Bucharest to Bern, huge swathes of Europe were swamped. Romania, Bulgaria, Austria, Germany and Switzerland, all recovering from days of torrential rain. From Germany, Shuli Ghosh reports.
In the town of Passau, people are used to clearing away the wreckage left by flooding. Two rivers converge here, the Danube and the Inn. Floods are no rarity, but this one was the worst for 3 years. Overnight, the Danube broke its banks, pouring tons of river water through the streets and easily breaching the sandbag defences put up by emergency workers. As the roads were submerged, there was only one way to get around. There were no casualties here, but some 200 properties were swamped. This morning, as the waters slowly receded, local residents were faced with thousands of pounds worth of damage.
Just here, it's hard to tell the difference between the river and the town. There's several feet of water coursing through the streets here. But as the day goes on, the water levels are dropping, and residents and business owners who are busy cleaning out their properties will be hoping that they've seen the worst of it.
100 kilometres away in Regensburg, water levels rose rapidly, leaving wildlife seeking sanctuary on higher ground. But not all sanctuaries were safe. Near Neustadt, the centuries-old monastery was flooded, with monks and firemen working desperately to save the church. Elsewhere in Europe, the picture is grimmer still, with more than 40 deaths across several countries. In Romania, the first and hardest hit, the waters have only now begun to recede after days of suffering. In Switzerland, the historic town of Lucerne is largely underwater. A landslide has destroyed the only road to the nearby town of Engelberg. Met Office experts are predicting more rain, but crucially they say the worst could be over. Shuli Ghosh, ITV News in southern Germany.
And now with a look at today's big sports stories, here's Jonathan Wills.
James, thank you very much indeed. It's a case of honours even after day one of the fourth Ashes test at Trent Bridge. After winning the toss and choosing to bat, England reached 229 for 4 before rain and bad light stopped play. But that didn't stop a packed house enjoying another fascinating encounter, as our sports correspondent Mike Hall reports now from Nottingham.
England fans are riding high this summer. 16,000 of them packed into Trent Bridge, and they're no longer hoping to see a home win, they're expecting it. England's heroics in the last 2 tests have left this Ashes series locked at 1-1, making this the hottest ticket in town. With rain forecast, England made the most of a sunny morning session. Openers Marcus Trescothick and Andrew Strauss got them off to a flyer, their cause helped by the late withdrawal of Aussie pace bowler Glenn McGrath. But then came the breakthrough. Strauss caught Matthew Hayden off the bowling of Shane Warne for 35. A freakish dismissal off bat and then boot, confirmed by the third umpire. England could have been 2-1 up in this series had it not been for the weather, and it's followed them to Nottingham. It disrupted the afternoon and England's momentum. Trescothick bowled first ball after the resumption by Aussie newcomer Sean Tate, and he quickly struck again. Ian Bell back in the pavilion for just 3. Vaughan led from the front at Old Trafford with 166 and looked in good shape as he brought up his 50 here. But the tourist fight back continued as the captain fell to opposite number Ricky Ponting. The rain again intervened and brought play to a premature end, England on 229 for 4.
Well, it may not have been a full day's play here, but we've already seen enough from both sides to suggest that this fourth test could be yet another nail-biter. Mike Hall, ITV News, Trent Bridge.
Now, last season it took until the semi-finals for Liverpool and Chelsea to come face-to-face in the Champions League. This season's European showdown will come even earlier due to a change in the rules. Group G holders Liverpool, the top seed, they face Chelsea, and they're also up against Anderlecht and Real Betis. Well, for Chelsea...
And it was a special match. I'm sure the two this season will be very similar. They'll be close. They're a fantastic team and they've got a special manager, so we'll look forward to them two games.
Just finally, deep down, how did you react when your name came out of that in the same pot as Chelsea?
It wasn't a surprise, to be honest. I think when we never got the country protection, there was always a chance, and when the first couple of teams come out, I knew it was going to happen.
Well, in the other groups, Arsenal, they appear to have a relatively easy ride through to the knockout stages. Dutch side Ajax, their toughest opponents in Group B. Well, Manchester United will also be confident of making it through against Villarreal, Lille and Benfica. The toughest task, though, faces Rangers in Group H, who are up against the top seeds, that is, of course, Inter Milan and Porto. And that's the sport for tonight. James.
Jonathan, thank you. I'll be here again in a few minutes with a look at some of tomorrow's front pages. But first, let's go to our ITV colleagues around the country for all the latest news where you are tonight. Join us again.
Good evening from the Central Newsroom. Tonight, another kick in the teeth for ex-MG Rover workers. It's emerged the new owners of the company, Nanjing, want to turn an office block into homes for hundreds of Chinese workers. Marcus Bennett has the story.
It's just over a month since Nanjing bought MG Rover from the administrators for around £50 million. Now it's emerged they've applied for permission from Birmingham City Council to turn part of the offices into residential accommodation for up to 400 Chinese workers. It isn't clear what those workers will be doing. It's thought they might have been brought over to strip out the manufacturing equipment.
What we can't understand is, being as there's thousands of workers in the Longbridge, Rednall, Bromsgrove, Redditch, all within an easy distance, what are quite capable as ex-Rover workers of coming in and dealing with any part of this plant they want to deal with, why they can't be given these jobs.
Birmingham City Council says it's been in a meeting with the Chinese company this morning, and they have to consider every application in the same way, regardless who makes it.
As regulator here in terms of the planning process, we have to go through the channels and to consult, to consider, to report to the planning committee, and a decision to be made at the end of September.
In Longbridge itself, ex-MG Rover workers have mixed feelings.
I can't understand why they've got to bring more people from abroad when you've got perfectly good workers who've been doing the job for 35, 40 years.
They bought the company. I mean, they employ who they want to, don't they?
Tonight, Nanjing have been unavailable for comment. And these are some of the offices that Nanjing want to convert into temporary accommodation for up to 400 Chinese workers. Meanwhile, the Transport and General Workers Union said they'll oppose the plans and are now calling for urgent talks with Nanjing. Marcus Bennett at Longbridge for Central News.
6 members of a Wolverhampton drugs gang named Flavour have been sentenced in a Scottish court to 45 years in jail. The men admitted selling heroin and crack cocaine in Aberdeen. And as Eric McInnes now reports, it's not an isolated case.
They were sentenced in an Aberdeen court today for their part in a massive drugs operation. 6 men from the Wolverhampton crime syndicate Flavour, who admitted selling heroin and cocaine in the Scottish North Sea town. Working 24/7 in 2 shifts, they sold thousands of pounds of drugs every day. Recruiting local pushers, they hid the cocaine and heroin in Aberdeen's public parks. The police arrested them after 6 months' surveillance. The connection between Wolverhampton and Aberdeen may seem a strange one, but North Sea oil brought huge prosperity to that Scottish town. That meant cash, it meant crime. First of all, it was prostitutes coming from here and going to Scotland for the summer months. Then it was drugs, heroin, and ultimately crack cocaine. One victim of the trade was footballer Kevin Nunes. He had been arrested in Aberdeen by Scottish drugs officers. The next day he was found shot dead on a grass verge in Pattingham, near Wolverhampton.
For some time now, crack cocaine in particular has been being brought to Aberdeen from the West Midlands area. From that has stemmed one or two other groups who've caught onto the bandwagon and come to Aberdeen and carried on that trend of pushing that drug up here. They've seen that there's vast profits to be made in the crack cocaine market in Aberdeen.
And police believe there are at least 3 other major Wolverhampton gangs still selling their misery on the streets of Scotland. Eric McInnes for Central News in Wolverhampton.
Well, it's been a day of mixed emotions as thousands of youngsters woke up with butterflies in their stomachs and their GCSE results. Steve Keeling was there to experience it with them.
After 2 years of studying, umpteen lessons and many weeks of waiting, it was the moment. Youngsters at King's Winford School in the Black Country found out how they'd done at their GCSEs.
Wow. I'm really pleased. Oh God, I'm really happy.
I've got B's and A stars and A's in it nearly every day, so I'm really pleased.
There was time to tell Mum. So what are you going to tell her? How did it go?
Very well. Much better than I expected anyway.
And time for some 2/3 of the 181 youngsters to celebrate. They'd passed at least 5 exams at grade C and above. Some, though, found it a more difficult moment.
E, F, D, D. Oh, I got a C. No bad.
For most, though, a happy day. But among the celebrations, the nagging question: if so many do so well, are GCSEs too easy?
I think the teaching has improved. I think the pressure that the pupils and students are under these days has increased tremendously. We're constantly looking for ways of improving. The exams have got harder over the years. We are always trying to adapt accordingly.
Whatever the political arguments, we must remember for the youngsters involved, this has been an extremely important day. And one thing many teenagers don't understand is why, when they do what society asks them to do, pass their exams, they can still be criticised. Steve Keeling in King's Winford for Central News.
And well done to everyone who got their results today. Time now for the weather with Emma Jesson.
Central weather with BMIBaby.com.
Hello there, it's not going to be a bad bank holiday weekend, but you never thought you'd hear me say that. We are expecting it to be warm, close and humid, maybe with the odd light shower thrown in and a wee bit breezy from time to time. As far as tonight's concerned, we're looking at clear spells, any earlier daytime showers having died out by this time. Coolish temperatures though, and the cool feel continues into tomorrow in spite of some spells of brightness. By the afternoon, the odd light shower breaking out in the west of the region, and also by the very end of the day, some thicker cloud in the north there, possibly bringing in patchy rain for those parts overnight. 19 is 66, then everything's starting to warm up as we head into the body of the bank holiday. The odd light shower on Saturday and Monday, breezier and drier on Sunday. Bye-bye.
Central weather with BMIBaby.com, the airline with tiny fares.
And that's all for now. Philippa Thompson's here for our next bulletin at 6:30 tomorrow morning. Now it's time to rejoin James Mates in London. From all the late team here, a very good night.
Hello again. A reminder now of tonight's main news. Rival factions of Shia Muslims fought gun battles in Iraq today as politicians wrangled over the final details of a new constitution. Transco, the gas company responsible for a fatal explosion in Lanarkshire, was fined a record £15 million today. And 3,000 people have attended the funeral of Anthony Walker, the teenager murdered in an axe attack in Liverpool. Well, time now for a look at tomorrow's front pages. The Telegraph says Iraq on the brink of civil war. It reports, as we did, that a wave of violence is sweeping the country as the government pushes through its draft constitution. The Guardian says the government here is planning to push ahead with its controversial academy programme after this year's successful GCSE results. Its picture is of Anthony Walker's coffin. The Times reports that British Airways is investigating a possible security breach at its troubled in-flight catering company, Gate Gourmet. It said the breach could offer terrorists a way of planting explosives on board. Its picture is of the Australian cricketer Shane Warne smoking. And the Mail asks, how long will it take before the courts order doctors to resuscitate Charlotte Wyatt if she stops breathing? And that is the way it looks tonight. Next on the ITV News channel, are GCSEs getting easier? Today's results are put on the microscope. I'll be back at the same time tomorrow night, but from me and from all the team here, good night.
ITV National Weather, sponsored by Powergen.
Come on, Gandalf, it's nice, eh?
Hello, good evening. It's been a pretty awful day with a rash of showers plastered all over the place. Some heavy, some thundery. More rain to come for the north tomorrow. As far as the bank holiday weekend goes, well, it's very much a mixed bag. On to tomorrow straight away. Dry, bright start for the south there. But we've still got clouds, still got rain, even some thundery showers there in the northwest. Even here, it brightens up during the course of the day as these showers spill across Scotland into northern parts of England and Wales as well, remaining dry and bright elsewhere. But temperatures on the cool side, especially with the winds and the blustery showers. A quick look ahead to Saturday. Brighter day on Saturday. Some sunshine, some cloud, a few showers, but nothing like the sort of rain we've seen recently. And temperatures and the brightness on the up all the while. That's all from me.
Positive energy from Powergen.